This guy was losing his hair, so he microneedled his scalp to grow it back. But the question is, what does the science say? His results are really impressive, and in just a couple of months, he was able to have some dramatic before and afters. He literally went viral on TikTok.
It is time to stab my scalp with a bunch of little needles. It's very simple and very effective for hair growth. Probably the biggest question I get is, does it hurt? And by all means, it's not satisfying, but it feels like a light scratch or a light sunburn. There's no studies yet that show the exact needle length we need for hair growth, but the most optimal range is anywhere from 0.5 to 1.5. Start by disinfecting the needles with 70% alcohol, then a quick rinse of water, and I'm ready to go. Scalp 2 to 3 times, and when I'm done, I disinfect it with the 70% alcohol again, and then rinse it off with water. If you're using any topical medication like minoxidil, I wait about 6 hours, but online it says wait 24 hours. It's an alcohol-based solution, so it's gonna burn, and it was also a heart medication, so I want less to go systematic. I don't see much problem with oils right away, however, it's still gonna burn, so I'll still wait about 6 hours. You can also use this for acne scars on your face or even beard growth, but use a much lower length.
And personally, I've been telling you that I've been struggling with my hair. It's been like a 3 to 4 year journey, but it has gotten way worse recently, and there can be multiple reasons for hair loss. So I am personally super interested in this because I continue to find new bald patches on my head. And if this is alopecia areata, which is basically these patches of hair that just fall off, what he's doing might not work for me because he has what's called androgenetic alopecia, or at least that's what he said in a TikTok. And that is basically considered male pattern hair loss or female pattern hair loss. And for women, sometimes you can kind of have like a Christmas tree in the middle of the scalp. And for men, it can happen more on the sides and the crown. But in addition to my random bald patches that I keep finding on my head, I also feel like there is a bit of that going on. Now, I do work with some amazing doctors and derms who have looked at my scalp and been like, that's what it looked like. But remember that it's not an official diagnosis unless it is your care provider. So this is the thing about anyone in the medical field or anyone in the healthcare field or anyone in the aesthetics field. We're so attentive about taking care of others that we don't always take care of ourselves. And by the end of the day, we're so tired. So I need to do a little bit better. I'm doing a couple things at home, like my hair helmet, and I'm trying some new serums, and I am actually considering microneedling like this guy did. Now, I wanted to understand the science behind this. I wanted to dig into the research and actually see, are there medical studies or data showing that microneedling for hair loss can be helpful? And also, what are the dangers of this? Because he's doing this at home. And when you actually look at his technique, it's pretty good. He's actually spraying it with rubbing alcohol to kill any germs or bacteria, which is much better than what Kourtney Kardashian does, where she like rakes the derma roller like across a towel and then shoves it on her face, which is a terrible idea. But at the same time, things can go very wrong with at-home microneedling. So is this at-home treatment worth the risk? Yes or no? And each person's situation is dependent. So I decided to dig into some of the research papers. Now, there are a couple of research papers that have been done, but most of them focus on what's called androgenetic alopecia, AGA. Again, that's this male pattern or female pattern hair loss. So great if that's the type of hair loss, but if it is a different type of hair loss, if it's related to a thyroid disorder, if it's universalis, basically what Dr. Gary Linkov has, where you lose hair all over the body, this isn't gonna cut it. Microneedling on the scalp isn't gonna cut it. Now, some of the papers that I looked through had some very interesting things to say. But before we speak about whether or not they were able to regrow hair, we have to talk about what microneedling is. Microneedling sounds scary. And again, when done at home, it can be scary depending on how it is done and administered. But in professional settings or when done correctly, microneedling is fantastic for the skin, and we know this. Microneedling basically helps to stimulate the skin to remodel itself from the inside out. It's causing microneedles or micro wounds inside of the skin that your body then needs to identify, needs to heal, and actually needs to remodel the skin from the inside out. The way this works is through the wound healing cascade, which is made up of 4 steps that are fascinating. Homeostasis is the first one, and that's your body trying to get back into balance. If you get a wound, whether it's a cut from your cat that you're playing with and he got a little scratchy, or if you are microneedling or derma stamping a needle into your skin, that is creating a wound, and your body doesn't want to bleed out. So platelets are rushed to the area, and there's actually like this fibrous structure that forms that the platelets can grab onto, and that's what creates a clot. That's why you see a blood clot or a scab on the skin. And then after that comes inflammation. And people think of inflammation as a bad thing. It's actually great. And I feel like a lot of people don't talk about the positive side. But yes, inflammation is that redness, it's that heat and that swelling that can happen at the area, but that's actually your body recruiting your immune cells, basically recruiting your body's little army, your own little soldier villagers to that area to fight off germs and pathogens and to actually start the wound healing process and to bring in the other cells that are going to make more collagen. Literally, if we didn't have the inflammatory phase, we wouldn't be able to have the collagen and the elastin get produced. There's neutrophils and there's macrophages, there's all of these different cells that rush to the area. And it's super essential and it's a really great part of the healing process. But inflammation does get a bad rap because, I mean, it's red and it's irritating and it's painful. And of course, chronic inflammation or inflammation that doesn't resolve is definitely not a good thing. And after your body brings all of your special immune cells to this area, we enter the proliferative phase. And think of the word proliferative, right? To proliferate, to create. This is literally where your body is creating new skin. We're talking collagen. We're talking getting those fibroblasts in there to start creating all of the stuff that is going to turn into your new skin. Collagen is formed, and in the skin, it's often type 3 until we get to the very final phase, which is called restoration. And that's when the collagen type 3, the kind of new fresh collagen and all of this amazing angiogenesis, basically the growth of these new blood vessels and this new tissue, all of that starts to solidify. It starts to thicken. And that's when that collagen, the type 3, then becomes the type 1, which is the most abundant collagen in our body. And in the restoration phase, all of that work that your skin has just done, it kind of gets a little bit more tense. It gets what's called tensile strength, and it kind of stiffens up, and it basically turns into this new skin that your body has just produced. And quite often, depending on the type of wound that was inflicted, it also turns into a scar, which is kind of this knotted fibrous tissue. That tensile strength is increased, basically making your skin strong and resilient. And microneedling, or anything that stimulates the wound healing cascade, basically puts your skin through this process. Now, when you get a scratch from your cat, it's uneven, it's in one spot, and you don't really control it. With microneedling, you can actually control the depth as well as where you're microneedling on the skin. And so for things such as scar revision, for things such as fine lines and wrinkles, microneedling works really, really, really well. We know that. There's even therapies that include microneedling plus radiofrequency, like Secret by Cutera, one of my favorites. There's also Morpheus 8. There's some amazing ones that work so well. However, most of these have to be done professionally in clinic. You can purchase derma rollers and microstamps over the counter. There are so many disasters that can go wrong with that. The derma rollers are terrible. Do not get the ones that roll across the skin because they're creating basically these larger wounds that don't heal as well, whereas the stamps at least are a little bit more controlled. But I always recommend talk to a professional first. Tell them, hey, I'm gonna go do this at home, and understand the risks, understand how to do it properly, understand what needle length is right for you, and how to sanitize things properly so that when you do go home, if you're going to do it anyways, at least you're prepared. And again, this guy, I don't know if he went to a professional first or not. It seems like he is in touch with some really great clinicians, but he does seem to have pretty good technique. And that's the other thing, is that when he's microneedling, he's doing it over a head that is basically bald. When microneedling hair, one of the other dangers is basically breaking off the hair. Look at me, I got the longer strands, right? If I were to microneedle my scalp, would it help, or would there be the possibility of actually breaking the hair closer to the root? This is kind of why I'm hesitant about starting microneedling myself. I'm like, should I just do it in clinic? Should I do it at home? I want to. The intrusive thoughts are intruding. But he seemed to have really good technique, and because he was losing his hair, or his hair is naturally shorter, there's less of the risk that his would actually break off. But microneedling has been studied and shown to be very helpful for the skin, even for the chest and the back and other areas. But what about the scalp? And here's where we need to get into the studies, because some of them say yes, some of them say no, but all of them say we need more research. There was a pilot study done on people with androgenetic alopecia. Again, the type that he has, and the most common type of hair loss, where it kind of happens for women usually in a Christmas tree, and then for men usually around the temples and a little bit around the crown. The study specifically mentions why they think microneedling works to help with hair growth, and it specifically talks about stimulating the dermal papilla. We always talk about our layers of the skin, but remember, our scalp is kind of like skin too, and there's definitely layers here as well. Now, the epidermis are those top 5 layers, but the dermis of the skin can actually be broken down into different layers as well. There's specifically the papillary and the reticular dermis. This is where the skin holds connective tissue, but also the structure of things like the pilosebaceous unit, basically where our hair actually grows out of. And so this study basically says that if microneedling can stimulate dermal papilla, basically where the collagen and elastin little fibers live, in this deep dermis area, then that we could potentially see some really promising results in new growth, especially if the microneedling can stimulate new stem cells as well as growth factors, which we know from our studies in skin and doing it on the face that it can. What I really liked about this study is that they didn't just take 1 or 30 people, they studied hundreds of people who had mild to moderate androgenetic alopecia, and they decided to separate them into 2 different groups. One group was just given minoxidil, which is known as Rogaine, and it's that hair growth solution that you see over the counter or you can get as a prescription from your doctor. And then the other was given microneedling plus the minoxidil. And they actually took photos of all these people's scalps and then they shaved their heads. They basically shaved the hair to see would it grow back or not. They wanted to see not only how fast the hair grew, but the hair counts, how many there were growing out of each follicle. And they wanted to see what would happen between the minoxidil group and the minoxidil plus microneedling group. Here's what's fascinating. They took pictures and look at this before and after from just 1 week. The group that had microneedling plus minoxidil saw a rapid increase in growth, whereas just the minoxidil group didn't see that. And I have to say, this doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for everyone, but this is really promising. Now they had what they call an investigator evaluation, basically someone coming in and looking at people's scalps, but they also asked these people, how do you feel your hair grew back? And in the minoxidil with the microneedling group, 82% said that yeah, things were going really well and they saw a major difference, versus only 4.5% in the minoxidil group. Not 45, 4.5, which is a huge difference. Basically, the study concluded that for people who have this specific type of hair loss, microneedling plus this minoxidil was far superior than just the minoxidil on its own. And while that does seem promising, and while the photos look great, there have also been other studies that didn't find those impressive results. Specifically, there was another study done in 2022 where they only had 18 people. But even though this study looks promising, this did have both microneedling and minoxidil. So was it the microneedling that gave the result, or was it the minoxidil that could get into the scalp a little bit more? Very Well Health actually looked at a bunch of different articles, and they specifically said that microneedling as a standalone treatment doesn't have any data that says it's going to be super helpful, especially for people who have advanced hair loss. It doesn't really seem like it's doing anything, but most of the studies that have seen results have combined microneedling with a topical solution, basically something that goes on top of the scalp or the skin, such as this minoxidil. And minoxidil does work to help stimulate blood flow to the area, and it has been shown to keep the hair on the scalp longer. Minoxidil was originally created not for hair loss, but for hypertension. And people noticed, whoa, the people who are on this medication have like longer, stronger, healthier hair, like it's growing more. And that's when they figured out, oh, this can actually help when it comes to hair growth and keeping the hair and in those phases that keep it on the scalp for longer. And then they said, okay, well, if it works as an oral medication that they take by mouth, why don't we just put it in a topical formula that can be used on top of the scalp or the skin? And you do have to be careful because minoxidil has been shown to actually cause hair growth in other areas. For people who want to grow a beard, that could be great. For those who don't, it could be real bad, but we know that minoxidil can work. We also know that rosemary oil seems to be very promising when compared to minoxidil, and there's a couple studies on that. But the whole question here is, when minoxidil is combined with microneedling, why does it seem to work better in so many studies? And then if you have the microneedling without the minoxidil, there haven't been any studies that really show a benefit. So again, is it the microneedling doing something, or is it just the fact that the minoxidil can access the scalp and get into the scalp a little bit deeper, a little bit easier? Now the good news is that there is a study that's been done on PRP and microneedling that didn't include minoxidil. PRP is platelet-rich plasma. Basically, you can get this for your skin, otherwise known as the vampire facial, but we draw your blood, we put it in a centrifuge machine, we take out the platelet-rich plasma, and this can be either placed on the skin or microneedled into the skin to stimulate new growth, new collagen, new elastin, and to give your skin that resiliency and glow, literally from remodeling it from the inside out. Now here's the thing, PRP has actually been used and is used in many dermatology and hair loss clinics because it works really well. And this study looked at PRP plus microneedling. So no minoxidil, but PRP and microneedling. Now again, this isn't the perfect study because it's not microneedling on its own, it's microneedling with the platelet-rich plasma, but in 18 different people that they looked at, guess what they found? They had a hair pull test where they pulled on the hair, they had a hair count test where they looked at how much there was, and in the group that had the microneedling plus the PRP, they had a much greater increase in hair count as well as resiliency with that pull test in the PRP plus microneedling group when compared to just the PRP alone. So the PRP alone, okay, but the PRP plus microneedling really seemed to work way better. So when we look at some of these studies, it looks like microneedling plus minoxidil or PRP is more effective than just some of these solutions, the minoxidil or the PRP on its own. But what about just microneedling? Well, the good news is that a 2022 review basically looked at a ton of these papers and tried to make heads and tails of them. And they actually specifically looked for papers that had microneedling monotherapy. Mono meaning one, therapy meaning this treatment. So one treatment, just the microneedling. And they specifically wanted to see if only microneedling on its own was going to be helpful for hair loss. They focused on androgenetic alopecia, but I think they did include a couple of other hair loss types in there as well. They did state that the exact mechanism of microneedling and stimulating hair growth is unknown. For example, is it stimulating that wound healing cascade that we spoke about, the one with those 4 steps, or is it helping for another reason? But that's the most important thing. They did find that microneedling as a standalone treatment actually seemed to work better than just some topical solutions like minoxidil without the microneedling. So from other studies, we know that minoxidil plus microneedling was better than minoxidil, but because of this review, the authors are basically saying even microneedling just on its own seems to be superior than just putting minoxidil on its own. They also said that increasing the frequency of the microneedling, so how often someone did the treatment, and the duration, so how long they did each treatment for. In their review, they also found that there were 2 key things that really enhanced and kind of accelerated this hair growth. And number 1 was the duration of how long microneedling on the scalp was done. So was it done for 10 minutes or 30 minutes? And then how frequently it was done. Was it done just a couple times a year? Was it done once a month? Or was it done once a week or even more frequently? And the authors do state that there's limited research on this. We honestly need a lot more research on microneedling the scalp for hair loss and then combining microneedling with some of these other things like PRP or minoxidil. And they said that while results look promising, more research is needed, specifically with randomized controlled studies. People who don't know which treatment they're getting and they can't be influenced by the placebo effect as easily. And while this does look really good and while this guy's anecdotal TikTok story looks amazing, here's the thing. Microneedling specifically at home for the scalp can have some downsides, which I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about. And I want to talk about some of those here because as an esthetician who has done microneedling professionally, both in clinic on others and on myself and with doctors and dermatologists, and actually spoke at the EADV about microneedling, there can be some major drawbacks to doing it at home. And this includes the skin as well as the scalp. The first is obviously infection. If you're doing microneedling either professionally or with a professional, you have a better chance of doing it in a sanitary manner, using sterile tools and needles. Whereas at home, things can go wrong really badly, especially if you're not trained. You can literally introduce bacteria and pathogens and basically cause an infection if you're not careful and if you don't use sterile technique. And so many people don't speak about this, but it really can be so dangerous. And especially with acne, like if you have an acne lesion or if you have a fungal infection and you microneedle across the face, you could spread a staph infection all over. There was one girl who came in to see one of the derms that I work with, and this was years ago, but she basically had this acne that took over and she had tried to microneedle it because she told that was good, and then the acne just took over. It wasn't acne, it was a staph infection. And how terrible was that for her to have to go through that and then have to basically be put on medications to deal with the staph infection that she spread and accidentally made worse. Well, just the way that infection can happen on the skin, it can happen on the scalp as well. And if you're doing this professionally with sterile technique, there is a greatly reduced chance of having these infections happen. But if you're not trained professionally, either as a professional with the right licensure, again, if you're gonna do it at home, tell the professional, get the advice first, know what to do, and then you can go home and freaking do it. That is a huge danger that I feel like a lot of people don't speak about. There's also that hair breakage. Again, for our TikTok friend, he was able to do this and he didn't have long hair, so there wasn't the risk of it breaking. But again, I'm actually kind of curious about doing this at home because I have the licensure I need, I have the experience I need, and I could do it in clinic, but like it'd be easier to do at home. But for me, I have this long hair. So if I'm microneedling or micro stamping right here, would I be breaking the hairs and actually causing additional hair loss? And then very importantly, we need to talk about scarring. We need to talk about keloid scarring and just regular scarring because scars don't grow hair. Look at your scars. Do they grow hair? No. And remember, the way that microneedling works is by stimulating our skin to go into that wound healing cascade. Remember those 4 steps? What's the last one? Remodeling, right? It's taking that granulation tissue from that proliferation stage and it's turning it into that hardened tensile strength that our skin or our scalp then has. But often that is done through a scar. So if we aren't being careful and we're causing scarring to the skin, that scarring could actually make the hair loss look worse because hairs could never grow through a scar. And then keloid scars are quite different. Keloid scars are those kind of raised and knotted scars that you see on some people. Not everyone is prone to them, but how terrible would it be to not know that you're prone to keloid scarring and you start microneedling your scalp or your skin or anything thinking that this will help, and next thing you know you end up with a giant keloid scar that continues to grow. And keloid scars can be very, very resistant to treatment. Should I try this? Am I dumb? Is this a great idea? What am I doing? Have I lost all hope? Just, I guess, reading some of these studies, seeing that we need more research, but seeing that the research is promising, seeing this guy's anecdotal results, and then knowing what has been done in clinic with PRP and, you know, these adjunct therapies that can do really well. I'm just like, you know, my eye restore helmet is working really well. I really love it, but I have been curious about the rosemary oil and the microneedling. And I was actually going to start the rosemary oil, but then I left it at a friend's house, so I couldn't use it consistently. What time is it right now? It's 2:51 a.m. It's 2:51 a.m., okay? Maybe this is a good idea, or maybe this is brilliant. But either way, I want to know what you think in the comments, and let's have a conversation around this because, I don't know, the intrusive thoughts are intruding. The itchy urge to shove needles into my scalp is getting stronger by the day. And I don't know. If I try it, I'll definitely tell you if it f***s up my scalp or if it works or not. I of course take you with me. If you're subscribed, if you're not subscribed, then you won't see. But yeah, I spent like 12 hours reading medical studies about this and way too long scrolling on TikTok to even find this guy, and his results are amazing, and well, that's what I found. Anywho, I hope you learned something. Like it if you liked it, or dislike it if you don't. Me not Mudahar, but me appreciate Mudahar. Always remember to reapply your SPF. We do need to talk about scalp SPF. And overall, most importantly, be beautiful both inside and out. I love you, and I cannot wait to see you in this video right here, rosemary oil for hair loss, because yeah, we need to talk about this. Love you guys. Bye.